The Fantastic Four were created in the 60s during the space race. You know, it was JFK, it was the time of optimism, of looking to the stars. And it's so baked into the DNA of the comic book that it just felt like, why not set it in that time? But also we were putting it in our own version of the 60s in this retro future world.
We are doing something very unique and really embracing the spirit of the comics in a very direct way. And we needed artists and storytellers and filmmakers to help us do that. And we have Kazra, the production designer of Loki Season 1 and Season 2, doing the Fantastic Four and bringing this retro futuristic look to an entire New York City and an entire world.
We're setting the story in an era and in a location that's at once completely familiar and relatable, and yet is completely innovative and new.
We wanted to add that layer of what if Reed Richards existed? He's Steve Jobs meets Einstein, you know, so the idea that he would have changed the technology in this city felt really exciting to us.
So if you think he was born in 1930, he probably wasn't affecting the world too much until he was around 20 years old. So basically everything that was designed and built prior to 1950 might look exactly the same as our world. But the things that came after that point would start to telegraph his influence. All of a sudden, there's a flying robot or a monorail with turbine engines on it and a flying car.
Matt very much challenged us at the early stages to try and do as much as we could practically. And we have built Times Square.
It is the place in the movie where we can most clearly demonstrate what our retrofuturistic mid-century New York looks like, where you have classic buildings like Horn and Hardart and Layton's and Whelan's, which were like real places in Times Square in the era. And then you contrast that with a lot of retrofuturistic elements that were not there, like Dom's Diner, which is the shape of a giant UFO.
Times Square was quite daunting in terms of set decoration. How far do you go? How much detail do you put in? One never knows if they're going to put cameras inside shops. So we really allowed the dressing to be as though there might be a camera inside looking out. And so we really dressed it all for real as far as we could.
There was just so much care that was put into what the movie looks like. And I think that that aesthetic really informed a rich way of realizing these characters.
It was such an imaginative space. It wasn't something that anyone had ever seen. So it was a magical experience. And those night shoots were amazing. We were so blown away.
Great.
Yansy Street is counterpoint to Times Square. It is the more kind of classic New York, largely built before Reed Richards' influence, where ordinary people live, and there's a kind of a neighborhood quality to Yansy Street.
How's Sue doing? No, she's getting close. She was craving some Maisie's cookies.
Yansy Street for us was about community, about embracing different cultures. So we had, you know, the Jewish bakery, and we had the synagogue, the Italian barbers, and we had the Puerto Rican deli, you know, the trendy record store. We really tried to make Yansy Street very much part of the normal world, not the futuristic world. So when Ben comes back to it, he feels he's come home.
You know, it feels really good being back here. I like that everything stays the same.
The Baxter Building is on the east side of Manhattan, and Matt had an idea early on that the launch pad of the Excelsior would be built over the East River.
It was important for the space launch to feel adventurous and for it to feel ambitious, and it was transcendent.
They've got a beautiful, amazing sort of retro future rocket launcher. So when launches are happening, it feels like Cape Canaveral, and people are gathering on the opposite bank to watch this amazing moment as they jet off into space.
The Baxter Building is a very unique building in that it's the home to the Future Foundation. So there's a kind of an assembly hall within the base of the building. That's what we're shooting in Spain. And then we imagine that there are many floors of administration. And then above that, I think there's a series of laboratories full of scientists that are working under the direction of Reed Richards. And above that is his own laboratory. The lab is super organized into 3 distinct workstations. There's the red workstation, which is where prototypes are made, anything hands-on and analog. And the yellow area is an area for contemplation and discussion. And then finally, there's the blue area, which is the sort of mission control area.
Most of it is being handmade by our model-making department. It was a real feat, and it actually went to the wire that we're still working on at 11 o'clock at night, you know, shooting in the morning. But once it was done, we were all very proud of it.
That all helps with the suspension of disbelief, which is critical when you're creating a fantasy world.
It worked.
Welcome to the Baxter Building.
The apartment was very challenging for our model-making department. We had to do a huge floating fireplace, which had to be taken in and out. We also had a sunken seating area, which everybody enjoyed.
You know what? The sunken living room was really cool.
I think there's going to be a massive resurgence in sunken living rooms. I want one.
And then we designed and built the kitchen of the future. We had a revolving fridge, and we had all the American products of the time loaded in, and that was one of the sets I was really pleased with.
Wash your hands first, please.
I was on my gloves
Just
the whole
wash your
time.
Let me try that. Okay. Okay. Is this guy good? That is fantastic.
Having a practical Herby just felt like having another actor on set. Alistair, our head of special effects, did an amazing job building multiple Herby robots that were run by a team of effects artists and puppeteers.
I was very excited about Herby. The reality of how big of a character he was going to be just grew and grew. Design and build was probably around 22 weeks. It was a bit of a tight time frame, but he pretty much does everything that we'll see him do on screen. And our team have really learned how to interact with the different cast members.
Oh, thank you, Herby.
Thank you, Herby.
There's just something about Herby. I kind of fell for him pretty quickly. He's so cute. I just kept trying to touch him on the head a bunch, and I don't know, I felt like we had a shorthand. I felt like Herby and Ben maybe spent a lot of time together. They were homies in a way. Is this guy good?
And then we brought in Jack, who's our puppeteer, and that was really, really helpful. And Jack's an actor himself, and so he was finding ways to create humor and connection. He brought so much to what Herby was doing.
It's about finding the balance between that robotic, logical nature, but also kind of flavoring it with human emotion.
Herby, record.
It's fun to play those moments on set, those little moments of connection.
My laboratory felt like it was as long as a football field. I'm just going back and forth, and poor Herby's following me around and reacting and basically in dialogue with me in all these scenes. And I thought it would be really boring and tedious, and instead I had a great scene partner. Jack was so tuned in and reacting to everything that you were doing and doing little whistles and stuff like that.
New deep space transmission.
I'm very indebted to him.
Good job, Herby.
With Matt Shackman's approach, he's always done it through the lens of what was available to filmmakers in the 60s. What were the techniques they used back then?
We spend a lot of time when you're working on something that has a lot of VFX, looking at shots and saying, gosh, what will make this feel more realistic? Which, of course, when you film something for real, you never have those questions because it's real. So why not shoot a miniature rocket?
The miniature of the Excelsior spaceship behind us is 1/30th scale, and it's about 13.5 feet long, about 6 feet tall. It took us about 14 weeks to build. It's made of fiberglass and aluminum and lots of 3D printed parts. So it's got quite a few details with panel lines, rivets, vents, engines, things like that, to give it a sense of scale and to hold up to that close-up photography.
It feels very much of the time, but also retro future as well. So it encapsulates perfectly the kind of stylistic world that we were trying to create.
The idea is that all of this stuff, from the Baxter apartment to the Baxter building itself, to the lab, to the fantastic car, to the Excelsior, have all been designed by Reed Richards. And so the Excelsior and the fantastic car were two things that we sort of designed in tandem. You can look at the form language of the two, and they're very related.
With the fantastic car, we were looking at trying to treat it like a real car that could transform and fly and do all kinds of amazing things as well, but also is literally a car. And I started to look at a lot of concept cars from that era. There were concept artists working back then to try and create what their idea of the future was. And that's what the world we're trying to build is.
That took a lot of designing to get something that looks different, that can drive and fly. And we used Alistair and special effects and his department to build the cars.
It's a really interesting design. It's effectively a convertible car. Most convertible cars, because they have no structure in the roof, they have like transmission tunnels and things like that that give them strength in the floor. But our department were quite keen to have a flat floor because there's 4 people and an interesting seating arrangement. So that meant there was no strength in the floor and no functional roof. The other really complicated part of the car is that the canopy and the doors open as sort of a 4-item. You've got front canopy, rear canopy, and the 2 doors. And they all have to open in a sequence because they overlap and interlink. So there's a small motion control computer in there. Once we've settled on the design that can work, then we start to build it. The hero car itself has an interior. There were just so many moving parts and minute details. My team have built cars before, but just nothing quite so gorgeous.
So sexy, it's great.
And we decided to put an electric drive unit in there. So that's got roughly a 200 horsepower front wheel drive. But then it became apparent that the third act needed much more action from that car. So we very quickly started to build a second one. And the needs for the second one just grew and grew and grew. So we used a 500 horsepower rear wheel drive electric system for that. It's basically a performance sports car.
That was a tremendous amount of fun, and then we put it up on a big gimbal, and when they're flying through the air, you know, it was able to move in the way that we needed it to. For a long time, we were debating about flying cars in general, but for the most part, the skies belonged to the Fantastic Four.
Being around virtuosity in this business is thrilling. What they've done with this world is beautiful.
Matt had a very, very specific visual vision that like existed on a big macro level in terms of the world, and then also on a tiny, minuscule level and just like little details. I mean, that takes a certain kind of mind to be able to hold the breadth of that vision. And that was incredibly valuable and impressive.
It was just so fun to step into an era that felt so familiar and yet so otherworldly.
It felt like a real opportunity to try and establish an essence of these characters.
This is a film about humanity and humanity dreaming of what's ahead, right? We're imagining a future beyond geopolitics. I mean, this is what science fiction does best, which is to dream of a better future.
Thank you for clicking on our video, everybody. If you like what you saw here, please make sure you like the video and subscribe and share with your friends who like this sort of content. Joblo remains an independent company, and we appreciate all of your support.